Welcome to Shenanigans Ensue with
Mary SanGiovanni!
Hi folks, welcome to Cosmic Shenanigans. I'm Mary SanGiovanni, and as always, I'm up to shenanigans of cosmic proportions. Today, in keeping with trying new things, as we've been doing the last couple of episodes, we're going to discuss a piece of art. We're going to talk a little bit about its history, and why I think the imagery suggests cosmic heart. Now, one of the things I want to say about art, since this is the first time that we're tackling a visual piece in a non-visual medium, is that it's always been my belief that a painting, kind of like a short story, or even maybe more so like a poem, is a series of symbols in image form which suggests a bigger picture. You know, as Lovecraft said, if the mind could correlate all of the events, all these little pieces of events as we see them, we'd get a real big picture of something kind of creepy. And I think that some of the best art does that. It's not just what you're looking at on the surface, but it has a lot to do with the connections that people make, sometimes personal and sometimes sort of collective throughout society, but the connections that people make based on the images that they see. And that extends to everything from colors to, you know, symbols in the foreground and in the background, to the body language of any kind of figures in the painting, etc. Now, the one that we're going to do today, you might be familiar with. The art piece in question is a painting called The Hands Resist Him. You've probably seen it before. If you haven't, if you look it up on Google, it pops up right away. The artist is Bill Stoneham. He painted it in 1972, and the reason it's so easy to find is that the painting itself has quite a history of being a haunted painting. According to Stoneham, all right, who was when confronted with all of the sort of viral internet information about people believing that this painting is haunted, he was surprised by it. He was really kind of shocked that people took his painting that way. According to him, the picture features a little boy, a very serious-faced little boy in shorts and a t-shirt, standing next to a little girl in a doorway. The little girl appears to be a doll or a robot of some type. In the doorway behind them is darkness. It's the night, because you can see a waning moon way up in the top of one of the door panels. And you can also see a series of very pale hands that are reaching toward the doorway as if trying to get in. Now, the fact that the painting is called The Hands Resist Him, we're going to come back to. But essentially, this is what we're looking at. And if you go ahead and look it up. All right, now that you've found it, let's talk about this. According to Stoneham, as I mentioned, the little boy in the picture, is based on a photograph of himself at age 5. The doorway, according to him, is a representation of the dividing line between the waking world and the world of fantasy and impossibilities, while the doll is a guide that will escort the boy through it. The titular hands represent alternate lives or possibilities. Now, again, as I mentioned, this painting became the subject of an urban legend because in 2000, it was posted for sale on eBay along with a description implying that it was haunted and that the sellers were not responsible for anything that happened to anyone who bought this painting. And it sort of kicked off a number of things on eBay and elsewhere on the internet of people selling haunted objects with this supposedly supernatural and often possibly dangerous history attached to them. There are a number of haunted paintings. The Crying Boy is another one. There have been haunted Dybbuk boxes, all kinds of things like that people have sold, ghosts in bottles, the whole nine. So this sort of kicked everything off. Now, according to the information I found about the history of this painting, it was first displayed at It was first displayed at the Feingarten Gallery in Beverly Hills, California, during the early 1970s. It was a one-man Stoneham show. That is a pretty big deal for artists when they have a one-man show. It means it's all their stuff. The painting was purchased by actor John Marley. Now, you might know John Marley for his role as Jack Woltz in The Godfather. Now, sometime after Marley's death, we're not sure how or why, the painting was found on the site of an old brewery by an elderly Californian couple. Not too long later, they put it up for auction on eBay. According to this, it was in February of 2000. Now, according to this couple, the painting carried some form of a curse. In their eBay description, which you can also find if you're a little bit more diligent in the Google search, you can also find the exact wording of their eBay description. But essentially, they made a series of claims that the painting was cursed or haunted, that the characters in the painting moved during the night, and that the characters would sometimes leave the painting and enter the room in which it was being displayed. Also included with the listing were a series of photographs. You can find these. You'll recognize them by a close-up of the little girl robot, which is very red in hue. It's much redder than the original painting. And instead of holding what she's holding in the original painting, it looks like she's holding a gun. According to this particular photograph, it's supposed to be evidence of an incident in which the female doll character threatened the male character with a gun she was holding, causing him to attempt to leave the painting. The disclaimer was included, as I mentioned, with the listing, absolving the seller from all liability if the painting was purchased. Now, of course, this, excited a lot of fascination. The initial bid for the painting was $199. It received 30 bids and eventually sold for $1,025. The buyer was the Perception Gallery in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now, they eventually contacted Bill Stoneham. They told him about the story about how, it was sold on eBay as being this haunted painting, and he was surprised. He was surprised by the stories, the strange interpretations. What the sellers claimed to be a gun, or claimed to be an item in the painting that would morph into a gun, according to Stoneham, is nothing more than a dry cell battery and a tangle of wires, which is odd in and of itself. I mean, the whole painting is odd. It's creepy in its presentation. It's an unusual painting to begin with. Another interesting tidbit about the history of this painting is that Stoneham recalls that both the owner of the gallery in which the painting was first displayed, the gallery in California, and the art critic who reviewed it died within 1 year of coming into contact with the painting. Now, I think that an argument could be made, if we're looking at cosmic horror in art, that this painting could fit the bill. Maybe either consciously or subconsciously without Stoneham realizing it. First, we look at the primary feature of the painting, which is the doorway. Okay? It's an unostentatious wooden doorway with glass panels. But it's a doorway. And if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes of Cosmic Shenanigans, you might recognize the cosmic implications of doorways between dimensions and between worlds. In much of cosmic horror, in much of Lovecraftian work, the idea of doorways between worlds is incredibly common. It is the suggestion that there is more out there in the universe, or there are more universes out there in the multiverse, if you will, that a doorway, especially when you're on the inside, a doorway always implies a larger, greater world, which we can only ever even glimpse a small piece of in relation to its actual size. So this doorway here, I think a doorway in any painting, really, is the symbol for a number of things, including the idea that there is a greater world beyond, something maybe which we can only begin to understand, something in which we are so small that we're almost dwarfed by the cosmic implications of the grander scheme outside. So I think the doorway is one of the first cosmic horror elements that we can attribute to this painting. We can also, I think, attribute the boy, in a certain Lovecraftian sense, as a representative symbol of a magician. Okay? In a lot of Lovecraftian cosmic horror, and to an extent, sometimes in more modern cosmic horror, we have the idea of a wizard or a magician, usually a loner, who is looking for knowledge, is exploring the very limits, the very boundaries of reality and nature and propriety, really, and what lies beyond all of those things. And we have a very serious little boy. I mean, the boy, if we're going by Stoneham's description, the boy in the painting's about 5, okay? But he has an incredibly adult expression, an incredibly adult face that is not the face of a 5-year-old, particularly if you look at the eyes. There is a look in those eyes that people do not, they do not inherit, I guess. They do not learn that look until they're much older and have seen much more of the world. Some people maybe never really obtain that look, because what it's based on is knowledge of things you can't forget. And I think that if we look at this painting in a cosmic horror sense, we're looking at a loner because he's by himself. There are no parents, there are no other figures in the painting that are human in any way. And we're looking at somebody who, if we were to examine and analyze the look in the eyes, is somebody who's seen more than anybody should have seen, let alone a 5-year-old. And I think that if we look at the title in conjunction to this, The Hands Resist Him, there's an idea in a lot of Lovecraftian and cosmic horror that whoever this magician is, and I use magician sort of as a catch-all phrase for the characters who are compelled or obsessed, for whatever reason, to find this knowledge, to seek out this knowledge, despite the fact that it may or may not be irreparably and irrevocably damaging to the character. And I think that if we look at the title, The Hands Resist Him, and his saying that these hands represent alternate lives, alternate possibilities, what he probably meant is that an artist is limited in how much of the fantastic we really can have by the boundaries of reality, and that, ultimately artists search those doorways to move beyond that into the realm of infinite possibility. In a cosmic horror sense, that infinite possibility is often accompanied by terrific truths, like these horrible and horror and terror-inspiring truths that once learned cannot be unlearned. But there is resistance. There is resistance for the sake of the fabric of the universe, the structure of reality as we know it. And I think that there would be resistance. There would be a pushback of those forces to keep us essentially sane and safe in our small, this side of the door life. And I think that the magicians in these stories often try to push against the resistance that they meet in looking for this esoteric and occult knowledge. So the boy is essentially a kind of magician, I think, and is looking to connect with these hands. Although I think you can also interpret, if you weren't looking at the title itself, I think you can also interpret the image as, it's not so much that the boy is resisting the hands, but the hands, whether the hands are trying to push through the door or push against it to keep it closed, I think either way, that works in a cosmic horror sense. the hands can be resisting his pursuit of knowledge, or they can be trying to break through the greater outer world, the cosmic horror largeness, trying to break into this small and unadorned room. Which leads us, of course, to looking at one of the most important elements, I think, in this particular painting, which is the hands. There are a series of pale hands. Judging by the size of these hands, they look like children's hands, which I think adds an extra element of creepy to it. They're small hands. They're probably not much bigger than the hands of the boy in the painting. And these hands also only seem to reach as far as maybe the bottom half of the door. Now, whether that's because they're reaching for a child whose height doesn't really exceed half the height of the door, or whether these are the kind of creatures that crawl on the ground and can only reach toward, that part of the door, it's not clear because it doesn't need to be. Essentially, whatever these hands are connected to is something lost to the darkness beyond the door. And that is another kind of cosmic horror element, that what we're looking at is something that goes beyond, we're only seeing a small piece of it. We're only seeing the instrument of action, the hand that can do something, the hand that can manipulate something or make something happen. But whatever that hand is connected to, whatever brain or motivation or emotion or lack thereof that hand is connected to, is not something that we're privy to in this particular painting. Stoneham says, again, that these hands represent alternate lives or possibilities. There really doesn't even need to be that much manipulation of his words to fit that into a cosmic horror framework. These hands could represent alternate lives, alternate dimensions, creatures of alternate universes. They can represent any number of things which exist in the realm of what we think of as the fantastical, but which clearly in this painting is intruding on reality. Whether he's a visionary or an artist or both, he is seeing that very thin glass boundary here between the safety of the inside our world, the reality, and whatever lies in the greater cosmos beyond. And when I see these pictures, when I've seen this painting, those hands to me don't look like human hands at all. They're pale, they're gray, they're kind of the color of corpse hands, really. And I think that Stoneham, obviously he knows what he painted, but I think that from a cosmic horror standpoint, it's pretty dead on that those hands represent the cosmic horror that we're looking at, the beginning of it, the edge of it that we can see. And if, God forbid, they push open that door or that boy opens it somehow, we're going to see an awful lot more of it. Now, one of the other elements, because if you're looking at the painting, the interior of the room we get almost nothing of. What we do get is plain wood. It's very sparse. There's no decoration. There's no real adornment. We're not working with a lot of symbols here. But before we get to the girl, we should acknowledge the moon. From a pagan standpoint, it is clearly a waning moon, and I know that probably doesn't mean a whole lot to most people, but in a lot of pagan religions, which essentially cosmic horror cults are very pagan-based religions, a waning moon means a time for the beginnings of things, the beginning of change, the introduction of things, the coming of something. And it's interesting that that's the kind of moon. He didn't paint a full moon. He painted a waning moon, which I think that, subconsciously is a symbol of things coming. Maybe whatever is on the outside, whatever those creatures are about to intrude on this world. That whatever resistance, for whatever reason, they have against this magician, he's going to break through, and that look in his eyes is only going to get worse, because whatever he's going to find is going to be bad. Now, we come to the girl. She's the last figure in the painting, and probably the last significant image of this particular painting. From a Lovecraftian or cosmic horror standpoint, we could say that the girl represents Lovecraft's grounding of all of his supernatural stuff in science. Lovecraft was an avowed atheist. He didn't believe in afterlife. He didn't believe in the supernatural and in gods and entities unless he could connect them somehow to some scientific principle or some factual principle. So you see an evolution, as we've discussed in past Cosmic Shenanigans episodes, of Lovecraft's monsters, although considered gods, are actually alien entities or interdimensional entities. And although he never really explains the science, he doesn't really need to, that there is a sort of biological, ancient alien theorist kind of background to what these gods are and what they've done. In fact, as a little aside, the longer you watch Ancient Aliens, the more it starts to sound like Lovecraft fiction, that these giant god monsters came to Earth and seeded the world, and that we were essentially slave labor for them, and it's a little creepy, actually. But anyway, I digress. The point is that he did try to ground a lot of these Lovecraftian monsters in a kind of basic science, that they were aliens or interdimensional type beings. To look beyond that, Stoneham says that this little girl is meant to be a guide into the world beyond, okay? She's one of the most unnerving figures in the painting. She's eyeless, for one thing. I know that Lovecraft's Azathoth, the blind god, was taken, I believe, from Babylonian or Sumerian. There's a god in their pantheon who was also a blind god, who was sort of the overseer of the workings of the universe, okay? And that he's blind because he sees everything in a different way. And you could attribute that to this girl in a sense, that her little eyeless doll face, she doesn't need eyes because the world that she is guiding him through, you see in a different way. You see with a different set of senses. And that's very much a cosmic horror idea, that our notions of physical sense, our notions of the confines of a body, are often upended and completely reworked in a cosmic horror kind of story. You also see that she's sad. And again, this is a personal interpretation. Other people may see it otherwise. But the structure of her mouth and chin seemed to indicate to me a kind of sadness, a kind of resignation. There's a blind, eyeless, frowning little girl. And again, a lot of cosmic horror, one of the inherent feelings that you get, although it's never stated or often not stated, and it's not, again, stated in the painting other than in her expression, is that once you know these things, once you discover these things, it reduces your significance and your pinnacle of civilized existence to almost nothing in comparison to what else is out there. That essentially everything that we do is pointless in the grand scheme of things. There's that nihilistic idea again. And she has an almost sad, resigned look, that if she is going to lead him into this world, it's going to change things forever. And it's kind of I hate to say, it is what it is, but that's kind of the look she has. It's like, this is how this goes. I also think it's interesting that she's holding a tangle of wires and a battery. That's what Stoneham says is in her hands. And it does look, the painting is, it does look like she's holding some type of metallic thing with tangles of wires and whatnot. It's one of those things that you tend, it almost looks like a spray can, but apparently it is a battery with a tangle of blue and red wires on it. And what I tend to think about that, I think maybe because it is not connected to a machine, when I think of blue wires and red wires, I guess I could think of jump-starting a car, but I don't. I think of bombs. I know that, in a lot of movies, when they have to, like, stop a bomb from detonating, they'll say, okay, you have to cut the red wire, you have to cut the blue wire, it's that kind of thing. And she has this thing with red wires and blue wires. I think it can represent a couple of different things in a cosmic horror sense. I think you could, if you did look at it as a bomb, then really what it is, what she's holding, is a symbol of power that could easily get away from us. It's a symbol of energy and destruction on a level that would devastate the world. She's holding that kind of power. And it could be symbolic of forces which would be unleashed on the planet, which we would have no control over and no real recourse of protecting ourselves from. You could also look at it, and maybe this was possibly more where Stoneham was going with this, you could also look at whatever that device is in her hands as something that she has wrenched from whatever machine it came from. And to me, symbolically, what that would mean is that it's not about the machines anymore. It's not about that grounding in science or that grounding in reality. What we're doing is showing that we are moving beyond science and moving into powers which don't need any kind of limiting fuel source. You know what I mean? So from a cosmic horror standpoint, again, what we're looking at is moving beyond human technological limits, human psychological limits, human physical limits, into something else. She's, whether this battery was ripped from her, because she is, of course, some kind of mechanical thing, or from some other machine of everyday life, machine of everyday reality, or whether it's a bomb. What she's saying is that power is, it's in her as a guide, as an emissary from this other world, and that she is essentially going to guide this boy beyond that. That the hands may have been able to resist him, but they can't resist them. And that this combined power here, this disconnection from our very, mechanical and traditional ways of thinking, is going to move us into a cosmic horror realm of things that we cannot unknow. And that once that door is opened, it is going to unleash this new era. It's going to bring the night outside in here. And once that door is open, it cannot be closed again. So I think that we could make a good argument for The Hands Resist Him as being a somewhat cosmic horror painting. Even though it doesn't it's not a painting of tentacles. It's not a painting of that which cannot be described. It's not, Lovecraftian in its ginormousness. But there are elements here that if you analyze it, and you correlate all the events, you put all the pieces together, that we get a kind of terrifying notion of bigger things out there, a bigger universe out there. And I think it's interesting that in analyzing this painting as a creepy kind of, series of images to begin with. Oh, and here's something else I didn't notice until just now looking at this painting. The inside doorstep that they're on, that little inside doorstep, has grass. They're on a step. It's not just the floor. See, a lot of pictures don't show this. They don't show the very, very bottom edge of this painting. And the bottom edge of this painting shows grass growing. So, essentially, there is no inside. This is outside and outside. But the outside on this side, the side of the door closest to us, where the child and the robot girl are, is bright. It is there's light here. There is daylight here, or at least some type of artificial light here. It is very bright. It is clearly not nighttime on this side of the door, and the grass seems to indicate, we associate grass psychologically with home. We associate grass with safety. We associate, believe it or not, we associate grass with a sense of health and vibrance because it is one of the most prolific plants on the planet, really. Grass is one of the first things we remember as children because we run through it, we play in it, we roll around in it. Grass is often a symbol of childhood and the very basics of life and reality. And there is grass on the child's side of the door, which again, I think, in a cosmic horror sense, suggests reality is on this side of the door. Light, safety, childhood, the basics, the grassroots of life as we know it is on this side of the door. Night and the hands and the waning moon are on the other side. And there's nothing but this wooden door with glass panes between them. And there's the crux of the cosmic horrors that is pervasive through all cosmic horror. Is the notion that the boundary between these things is often so thin and so breakable, and I don't think that we can ever really be comfortable with how thin that boundary really is and how quickly things could change if there was even just a crack in one of those glass panels in that door. So that, my friends, is The Hands Resist Him. It is our first analysis of art in cosmic horror. And if all goes well and you people like this episode, then maybe we'll try more art in the future. If you enjoy Cosmic Shenanigans, this episode and episodes before and forthcoming, you may also enjoy another show that I co-host, The Horror Show with Brian Keene. Both Cosmic Shenanigans and The Horror Show are available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, now on YouTube, on the Brian Keene YouTube channel, and all other platforms via the Project Entertainment Network. Also, thanks this week, a special thanks to Matt Wilderson, who is sitting in as engineer instead of Dave Thomas. You can check out his podcast, Grindcast, and where he talks about video games and all kinds of other fun. He has shenanigans of his own going on. And that's it for this week. I hope you enjoy it. I will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Every person's story has something to teach us. How others view life, how obstacles are overcome, how joy is felt, how fears are faced, how love is expressed. The Matters of Faith podcast explores individual stories of people's lives and how faith plays a part. It may not be your story, but it may help shape yours.
The Matters of Faith podcast with Jay Wilburn is on Project Entertainment Network.